Always a pleasure to be here, always a pleasure to have you out there in the audience. I have no guest except for myself, and I'm going to go through a few things here that are coming up pretty much. The first thing I'm going to start off, though, is I'm going to give you a quiz question. And about 10 or 15 minutes from now, I'm going to give the answer. The quiz question is basically this. In 1893, 125 years ago, that'll come up on June 20th. So on June 20th, 125 years ago, something took place. The big event has to do with Fall River, has to do with something that occurred, you might say, at that time in the center of the city, what we used to call downtown. And it has to do with a woman. So this took place 125 years ago. So that's something that you might be able to give an answer to as far as who was the woman. I want to get into a few things here. This is a part of a case that I read recently. Matter of fact, I read the case yesterday and today. And this has to do with the open meeting law, which is Chapter 30A, and this refers to Section 20. And it provides that with the exception of executive sessions, all meetings of a public body shall be open to the public. The statute defines a meeting as a deliberation by a public body with respect to any matter within a body's jurisdiction. So if it's the, we'll say if it's the Park Department, Zoning Board of Appeals, Licensing Board, all their deliberations have to be done in public, which means an open meeting. And if not, there could be a violation of the open meeting law. They were subject to certain exclusions. One of the items that doesn't have to be conducted in the public, obviously, is when they go into executive session. But that's only for certain items. It's not to conduct business in executive session. They'll announce they're going into executive session. They usually adjourn. They come back out, reconvene, and they continue on with the open meeting. Now, a deliberation is defined as an oral or written communication through any medium, including email, between or among a quorum of a public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. So, if you have a quorum and they meet at Joe's Restaurant and they start discussing business concerning the panel or the commission that they're on, that's a violation of the open meeting law. It's a very, I don't like to say technical, but it's a stringent matter. And the reason for it is that the public should be aware of what goes on with public bodies. Years ago, of course, when there was no open meeting law, a lot of business was conducted in the proverbial back room, the smoke-filled back room, where public business was conducted, and the public didn't know about it. So, and this is a case that just came out April 5th. So it's only about a week ago, April 5th, 2018. This was a Supreme Judicial Court case in Massachusetts. And the name of the case, if anyone's interested, is Mary Alice Bolter, and others versus the Board of Selectmen of Wayland. And what happened pretty much in Wayland was that the chairman of the Board of Selectmen asked other selectmen to put down, this was in regards to a town administrator. They were going to review town administrator's work. This was done annually. A lot of cities and towns do this, as well, especially towns. So the chairman of the board asked the other selectmen to submit to him written comments in regards to the town administrator. And then what the chairman of the board did was he composed a synopsis. And that was obviously challenged in court. And it came about in a sense that what the plaintiffs were saying is that those communications were part of a deliberation session. That wasn't done in public, it was done in private, and then the chairman of the Board of Selectmen took that information and then put it out as a synopsis to the members that when they convened the Board of Selectmen meeting. The plaintiff said that's a violation of the open meeting law. Well, the selectmen cited, and this is a good part of this case, the selectmen cited an Attorney General of Massachusetts opinion. And they said, well, the Attorney General said what we did was okay and not a violation of the open meeting law. Well, if you stop there, insofar as reading the case, you'll say, well, okay, then, you know, the Attorney General said it's okay, then I guess it's okay. Well, if you continue reading the case, these plaintiffs took their case to court. And the court sided with the plaintiffs, and it said the Attorney General's opinion is one thing. And it pretty much said the Attorney General's opinion was wrong. So you have to remember that you have the three branches of government, and you have the Attorney General, and that's not a true judicial branch. Well, it's not that's correct. It's not a judicial branch. It's not part of the court system. And the courts really decide or interpret the statutes, which are the laws. In this case, Chapter 30A. And the court said the Attorney General was wrong, that these communications amongst the selectmen was deliberations. It was violation of the open meeting law, and the plaintiffs won. So it was an interesting case. I know there are a lot of people who are very concerned about open meetings, the open meeting law. So you want to get yourself up to date, you might read this case, and it's good that people on these boards, we have a lot of boards in the city of Fall River especially, like the zoning board, the park board, historical commission, the licensing board. I mean, it seems to go on. And they should know what they're doing. And I'm not saying they don't, but it's good. I would think they would want to get this case, the individuals on the boards, and read the case. So, that's one thing. The other thing I want to mention is that come May 28th, Memorial Day, we're going to have the annual ceremony, not a celebration, it's a ceremony at the Miller Monument. Miller Monument is at the intersection of South Main and Shove Street in the south end of Fall River. There's a monument there to Corporal David Miller. And every Memorial Day, you'll find me there conducting a ceremony. Last year, we did it in the rain, and it kept raining. There was no let-up. But surprisingly, there was a good turnout. It even surprised me. Many politicians showed up, as usual, but a lot of the public showed up, and the attendance was very good. So this year, once again, May 28th, at the Miller Monument, that's Memorial Day, we'll be there at 11:30. Now, you might ask, why do we have the ceremony? Well, it's very important, first of all, to recognize what these monuments are about. There are numerous monuments throughout the city of Fall River. I don't know how many, but I would guess that 20, 30. And each one represents something. And for people to gather, community people to gather at these monuments and explain or have a little ceremony or some type of various presentations is important. It's important for the public to know, and it's important for the people who have come together long ago and said, you know, we should have a monument to a certain thing. Well, this monument is primarily in regards to Corporal David Miller. Now, David Miller lived across the street from the monument. And during World War II, he found himself, well, I would say at the start of World War II, he found himself in the Philippines. Now, can you imagine in 1941, 1942, you have a young man who was in the Army, United States Army, and he's way over in the Philippines. You have time, take a look at a map and see how far that is from Fall River, Massachusetts, from the United States, from the eastern part of the country here, all the way over to the Philippines. Now, World War II breaks out. As you know, the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor. President Roosevelt declares war on Japan, and the conflict between Japan and the United States of America begins. The Philippines were then eventually invaded by the Japanese. And it got to a point where American troops and Filipinos also were cornered in a certain part of the Philippines. The plight of these soldiers was very precarious, to say the least. Now, here you have the Japanese, part of its army, numerous divisions, coming, and they want to kill you. That's what their job is. Military forces are composed of people that want to kill the other side. And so Corporal Miller is there with many other thousands of Americans and thousands of Filipinos. The problem is they're cornered, they're running out of food, they're running out of fresh water, they're running out of medical supplies. It's hot. Things are just terrible. And then eventually they find out there's no possibility of evacuation. So they have no recourse but to surrender. They're weak, hungry, thirsty, they surrender. I'm going to read you some of the facts that took place at that time. And what it's going to lead up to is the so-called Bataan Death March. The Bataan Death March was the forcible transfer by the Japanese army of 60 to 80,000 Filipino and American prisoners of war. These prisoners were transferred, and a lot of them by foot, on April 9th, 1943. Excuse me, 1942. After a 3-month battle of Bataan in the Philippines during World War II. Now, this is the amazing part. The total distance marched to the camps is reported by various sources as between 60 and 70 miles. Can you imagine starting off in the summer here in Fall River and marching to the north of Boston somewhere? Hot, you're hungry, you're weak, you don't have water, and you're a prisoner of war, and you can't lag behind because the Japanese soldiers will stick a bayonet in your back, or maybe in your chest. Or if you're lucky, they might just shoot you. And that's what they did to a lot of prisoners. They were killing them. As the march progressed, Japanese were killing American soldiers, and they were killing Filipino soldiers. The estimate of casualties prior to reaching the camp, the Japanese prisoner of war camp, was from 5,000 to 18,000 Filipino deaths and 500 to 650 American deaths during the march. And the march was characterized by severe physical abuse and wanton killings, and was later judged by Allied Military Commission to be a Japanese war crime. Now, that's the reason why the monument was put there in the south end of Fall River, and that's why we go there to remember what took place, to honor people like Corporal David Miller, and all the others who were on this march. And the monument was placed there. This was under the administration of Daniel Bogan, the mayor at that time. The body of Corporal Miller was never returned to the United States of America. So that's a symbolic resting place for Corporal Miller. My understanding is that at one time a priest from St. Patrick's Parish went over there and blessed that ground, so it's consecrated ground. And it's there for Corporal David Miller and for all the servicemen, not only in the South End, that is mentioned many times, but the whole of Fall River, who served during World War II, and all the others who served during World War II, Filipino and Americans. So we'll be there for that. That usually lasts a half an hour. Nice ceremony. If you have time, stop by. We always like to have extra people on hand. Now I want to get to the quiz. So I asked the question: what took place on June 20th, 1893? A woman, it involved a woman, and the answer is Lizzie Borden. In 1893, on June 20th, in the Superior Courthouse in New Bedford, Lizzie Borden was found not guilty of the murder of her mother and father. And that murder took place on August 4th, 1892, right here in Fall River on 2nd Street. The house is still there. I believe it's a bed and breakfast. I'm sure if you stop by, they'd be happy to talk to you and possibly show you around the house. So, Lizzie was acquitted. Now, the other thing I want to bring up is there's been some mention about CPA money. CPA money is community preservation. It's a Community Preservation Act that was approved by the voters of Fall River. And another case I recently read, which I found to be very interesting, is there was a certain place in Massachusetts where CPA money was going to be used for not necessarily the restoration of a church, but given to a church to do some work at the church. And once again, there were some plaintiffs who said that that's illegal. And their argument was that based on the separation of church and state, CPA money cannot go to a church. CPA money is public money. It's taxpayer money. Taxpayer money cannot be used to fund a church. And part of it has to do with speech. When you see a church, you see a sign. You see a Catholic, Presbyterian, Congregational. That it's a message that they're sending. The church is sending, telling you what sort of a church they are, that they're active, and when it comes to CPA money, based on separation of church and state, which is in the Constitution, they're not supposed to receive any money. If it was a church at one time, and it's just a church, an old church building that's not active, that's different. And there's an example of that in Fall River, the Abbey Grill. They were given some CPA money, but they're not an active church. It's considered by many an historic building, and that's what the money is supposed to be used for, partly, at least, for restoration. Well, not necessarily complete restoration, but to help out where a historic building is concerned. So I thought that was another interesting case that I read recently in regards to Community Preservation Act money, which, remember, it's public money. It's money that you put into a fund through your real estate taxes. It's a separate part of the bill. If you look at your tax bill, it should note CPA money, so much. And I believe that's taxed on a quarterly basis when you get your tax bill. You have to pay your taxes on a quarterly basis. CPA money is in there. So, the other thing I have here is I want to mention that the Fall River Art Association. The Fall River Art Association is on Belmont Street in Fall River. They meet once a month. They have various activities. Sometimes they'll have art exhibits. People will submit their artwork, and they can win a prize. And they have all the little functions that they put on every once in a while, which are very interesting. I've been down there several times. They have a nice building on Belmont Street, and they're always looking for, additional people to help out. So, and what they're going to be doing soon is, at this point in time, they're planning a fundraiser. Now, I'm not sure where the fundraiser will be. It's going to be some sort of like a dinner dance. You buy a ticket, have a nice little dinner, maybe some dancing after, maybe a raffle where there'll be some artworks that'll be put up maybe for sale and for raffle items. So keep in mind that they're in existence. They need help, like a lot of these organizations, nonprofits. We don't seem to have the people that are interested in getting out of the house, attending and participating in some organization like the Fall River Art Association. And there are other groups, veterans organizations are having problems. They don't have the members that they used to have. So if you run across something, I'm sure there'll be something in the paper. They're planning this for the fall. But I mention it now because they do need some help. So if you're interested, if you're out there, you don't have to be an artist. You just want to help out. They're on Belmont Street here in Fall River. So I think that pretty much covers what I have. And I hope you did well on the little quiz. I thought it's interesting. I don't know what the city is going to do, if the city will do anything. I don't know if the bed and breakfast on 2nd Street, if they'll have any sort of function. But it will be 125 years, June 20th, 1893. A long time ago, but still something that is talked about pretty regularly in the city of Fall River, because it's still a mystery as to who done it. A lot of the circumstantial evidence pointed to Lizzie Borden, but that wasn't enough to convince the jury at that time to convict her. Remember, the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. Whether they were sitting there, the jurors thinking of that at that time, 125 years ago, I'm not sure, but their conclusion was, their verdict was, she's not guilty. She was released that day and returned to Fall River, and eventually bought a house here in Fall River and moved to it and died here in Fall River. And I think some of the family members are buried at the Oak Grove Cemetery. So that is the end of the program. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. And if you have any questions, you can always give me a call. So thank you out there for watching, and I'll see you next time.